Here's some quick, sneaky tips and tricks you can start doing in your games right now. If you have an ally on your team that can go invis level 1, tell them to go stand on the enemy's high ground mid. Then run up to them and give them your observer ward. From the enemy's perspective, that noob support just placed their observer. Let's go deward it. Baited, minus 50, easy peasy. This doesn't have to be used at the beginning of the game either, but that's probably the best and easiest time to do this trick. This could also work if, let's say, your ally was up on this high ground and you were below. Get creative with it, just don't feed in the process. Have you ever been staring at the minimap wondering where the enemies are? Then suddenly you see one of their couriers head across the river to your side of the map. Now you know where they are, in that area. Don't be that noob that gives away their team's smoke play with this type of courier movement. Instead, try this. When you're smoking with your team, send your courier off into a completely different direction. This will trick your enemies, making it look like you're over there. Let's say you're smoking into the enemy's triangle. Send your courier to their jungle. Now, if they happen to have vision of your courier, they'll think that's where you are. But really, you just outplayed them. Easy peasy. And honestly, there are a lot of different uses you can get out of couriers other than just bringing your items. Use to check runes, give vision of a camp to help stack it, use it to drag a creep wave if you're desperate. Again, get creative with it, just don't feed it in the process. You know how to aggro creeps, right? Just click the enemy as if you're initiating an attack on them. Now nearby creeps will aggro to you. This helps to bring the creeps back to a safer position for you to farm. You can also do this aggro trick by A-clicking an enemy's portrait at the top of the screen. It has to be an enemy that's currently showing on the map though. This is helpful if you ever want to aggro creeps, but there are no enemies on your screen. Instead of having to move your screen to a different lane, then click on the enemy, just keep your screen where it is and check your minimap for which enemy hero is showing. A-click their portrait and now you've just aggroed nearby creeps. Easy peasy. Also, quick tip about aggroing creeps. You can aggro neutral creeps the same way you do for lane creeps. They just need to already be aggroed onto something. This is especially useful when trying to stop an enemy from pulling. Another tip related to the portraits at the top of the screen. You can use abilities on allies by clicking the spell, then clicking it on their portrait. This is especially useful in hectic fights when it's hard to click on who you want. It's also helpful if there are abilities in the game that change the Z position of a hero. Go check out my video on how the Z axis actually works. For example, Tiny's toss. Usually it's hard to click on an ally when they're being tossed, but by clicking their portrait instead, you'll get them every time, as long as you're in range. Just be sure you know where your allies are on the top of your screen before an engagement. This way, you're not scrambling to scan all the portraits to find who you want during a teamfight. Note that you cannot target enemies with your abilities by clicking on their portraits. It only works on allies. Precasting an item or ability on an enemy. This makes it so you initiate the command to use your ability on them and it'll get used right away once they come into range. It's best for instant abilities like Rubik's Telekinesis or even a Yule Scepter. I find it best against heroes who like to jump in and initiate, like an Axe or a Magnus. Precast your ability on them and it'll go off before they can get their spell off. Just be a bit careful about doing it too early, since once you click it on the enemy, your hero will start running at them, and that might put you in a bad position. Usually I'll start doing it when I actually expect them to make their move. Okay, I'm only throwing this next tip in here because people keep asking me about it in my streams. They ask how I have this copy command to know the Roach Timer. It's simple. I just write it down. Take the time when the Aegis is picked up, so you just do 5 minutes after that. So 47:11 Aegis. The respawn time is 3 to 6 minutes after that. 50:11 to 53:11 Roche. Easy peasy. 5:33. As long as you take the time when Aegis is picked up, it's just 5:33. The Aegis that Roche drops expires 5 minutes after being picked up. Roche respawns 8 to 11 minutes after dying. So when the Aegis is picked up, which everyone can see on the side of the screen, just alt ping the in-game timer. Now with that time in the chat, add 5 minutes to it. That's when the Aegis expires. Now add 3 minutes to that for the earliest Roche respawn time, and another 3 minutes to that for the latest Roche respawn time. You can click Ctrl A on your keyboard to highlight all of that text, then Ctrl C to copy it. Now you have it ready to go. Just be sure you do not paste that in all chat. I've done that before and it was embarrassing. You know how sometimes you want to check if a cliff is warded, but you can't get vision up there. Now you need to wait for your courier to fly out, which might take a while. Or you might not even be high enough level for your courier to be flying. Well, did you know you can sometimes find a ward on a cliff by walking right up against it? This is really nice if you want to cover more ground with your sentry and you don't want to place it directly on the cliff. I find it specifically helpful when I want to deward my small camp on the radiant side, but also check the cliff for an observer ward. If I place my sentry on the cliff, I'd find the ward but not cover the whole small camp. By placing the sentry around here, I can deward the camp and the cliff. Same idea if I'm dire and want to block this camp. It even helps to cover most of this large camp and still be able to check the cliff. This works for any cliff on the map and is a tip we covered in my dewarding video. Go check it out. Another quick dewarding tip. If you find an enemy ward, do this before killing it. Click on it and check this buff above it. It tells you how long it's been alive. If it's full, that means the enemy just placed it and are probably in the area, so be careful. In general, this helps to know if and when an enemy was around, so make it a habit to check this. Here's a little trick to mess up the enemy's CS during the laning phase, and maybe help you get a deny. Let's say the enemy is wanting to get this CS, and that creep of yours is being attacked by all of these enemy creeps. So the enemy is kind of preparing to get the last hit based on the amount of damage your creep is taking from the enemy creeps, right? Well, if you draw creep aggro by initiating an attack on that enemy, like we talked about earlier, you'll make these enemy creeps stop hitting your creep and start moving toward you instead. Do this as your creep's health gets low, which is when the enemy would normally attack to get the CS. Now, they'll go to get the CS expecting their creeps to keep attacking, but you just trolled them and maybe you can deny it. Sticks are one of the best tools you can use to outplay enemies in the lane. Stack up some charges, bait the enemy into thinking they can kill you, pop stick, churn, and kill them. Easy peasy. For this reason, it's really important that you don't just give away free charges to them, because they can do the same bait to you. Instead, consider hiding behind trees before using an ability to harass them. This way you're out of vision and they won't get a stick charge. This is because they only get a charge when a visible enemy uses an ability. This might not sound like a big deal, but trust me, these things add up. Another small tip regarding stick or wand. If you're running for your life and you know you're going to need to use your stick to survive, consider this instead of just popping it. If you know the enemy is going to use an ability that has a travel time, like Venge's magic missile, try using your stick after they use their ability while it's flying through the air. This way you get that extra charge to heal up from their spell. This is risky as you need to use it while the spell is traveling, but sometimes that extra charge can be just enough to keep you alive. Use at your own risk. Next tip, become a member of our community. Join the Patreon or become a YouTube channel member. Get a bunch of awesome perks and exclusive educational videos, and get your name included on the screen like these awesome people. Links in the description and comments. Your ally dies in lane, you say, hey, can you bring my item? You drop it in base, they TP back, you check their inventory, your item is nowhere to be found. Check base, still on the ground. It's quite sad, isn't it? Well, you know what they say. If you want something done, you gotta do it yourself. Instead of asking them to bring your item, make them bring your item. Put your item on your courier in the base, then drag it from your courier to your ally. Now they'll come back to your lane with your item. Then you just gotta ask nicely for it. Try to do this as they're TPing back so you know they're actually returning to the lane. They might just run off to AFK farm the jungle and you'll probably never see that item again. So was that 10 tips? Just about, more or less, I think. If you guys have any sneaky tips that you're willing to share, let us know in the comments. I've been streaming a lot more recently on Twitch and YouTube, so be sure to check those out. Links in the description. You might even be able to join in some party games we do. Either way, come by and say hi. I love chatting with you guys over there. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you learned something new with me.